Hey everyone, I know I haven't uploaded in a while, but this is going to be a different kind of video where I go over an FMC mean I got this weekend, or yesterday, at Westport Warm-Up 2023. I got a 21.67 mean, which ranks 5th in the world, which is really good for me, even at home. So I'm extremely grateful for this, how I performed and, just everything that happened. So without further ado, let's just get into the solutions. So here we have the first scramble. We have 4 bad edges on green front, we have 8 bad edges on red front, and 4 bad edges on white front. So 4, 8, 4. When looking at the edge count, I was pretty, I was happy. I was like, oh, okay, 2 axes that have 4 bad, which means there's a lot of good stuff and a lot of short EOs you can probably find. So, I tried a lot of green front. I checked 5 green front EOs, and I checked a lot more on red front and white front. But one that I ended up going with that was really nice was basically so the 4 bad edges are here, 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 and here. So what I did was, you could do a 4-move EO where you do D prime, then bring these 2 edges up with R prime L, and then do a B. But I tried to do a bunch of variations of that. So I brought this edge up first with L, and then now we have 3 bad edges on the blue side, and this last red yellow edge is here. So I inserted it with 3 moves. I did D, R prime, D prime, and then I did a B to finish EO. And already there's a lot of aligned stuff. This isn't actually a DR minus, but or like a good DR minus for that. So I looked on this side. The thing with EOs is, you can look on 2 different sides basically. So I noticed that there's not really a lot oriented. But I saw this bar, and these 2 corners sort of this kind of bar here. So I did a U, and then I did a D. And then I noticed, oh, look at that. We have a DR minus 4 corners and 4 edges, which are here. And basically for that kind of trigger, you can set up to a single quarter turn. So that's basically the best kind of trigger when it comes to how many moves you can finish it in. So I noticed I did UD, and I realized you could bring this edge up here if you just do like a slice move, which also means you could just add primes to the U and the D. So instead of doing UD, I did U prime D prime, and we have this really nice DR minus where we have this bar, we have our 2 edges here, and our last corner is over here. So to finish DR, I did R L prime to bring this bar here and this corner over here, so that when I do a double turn, it'll align with this sort of half bar. Did D2, and then R prime, and then D. So when I finished DR, I took a look at corners, and they were really good. Basically, if you were to try to solve corners, you could do it just by doing R2, and then bring this corner up with a D2 or a U2. And then if you do one more quarter turn, you basically solved corners, but not HTR corners. So after DR, I tried to switch with NIS. So I took a look at any sort of 1 or 2 move continuations you could do that would lead to an HTR setup, which is half turn reduction. And usually that leads to very short finishes and sometimes optimal finishes. So what I did is I saw this bar on inverse, and I saw this kind of, big bar here. But this by itself doesn't look very good, but I did an R or an R prime. I actually did an R, I did an R, and what we see here is 2 bars, and this looks really nice. This is basically HTR minus 4E, 4C. And first I tried doing HTR on this side. I tried doing like, B2, U2L, and that led to something kind of good. But I didn't find anything that was insanely good for this side of the axis. So what I did is I switched back. So now we have DR minus 4E, 4C again. On the white, if you look at white top or yellow top, it actually doesn't look too amazing because it looks like you have 1 bar here and 1 bar minus 1 edge here, which doesn't look great. But if you actually look on the green top or blue top, we have 2 sort of almost bars and these kind of headlights here. So you can just bring them over here and then align them to make 2 bars. And that's exactly what I did. I did B2, U2. You could also do F2, D2, but the reason I did B2, U2 is because it makes this little square. So, I mean, I tried both of them, but I ended up going with this one because it ended up giving a good solution. And then I did, in order to finish HTR, I did L2 to bring this bar down here so that you can move this bar here, F2, and then L prime, so that. So as you see here, we have a very symmetrical looking HTR, which is always good, or not always good, but in this case, it's very good. I saw basically if you have, I had these blocks here, I had these blocks here, like everything. This looks like a short finish basically. So pretty quickly I realized it was a 4-move finish. If you do D2, that gets, these blocks going. And then it's just a simple R2, L2, B2. So that's a 4-move finish. It was a 12-move DR, a 2-move HTR, and a 4-move finish, which gives a 22. So that was my first attempt, and that was really nice. I was very happy with it because my PR single at the time was 22. I had 2 22s, and I just tied it again. So I was just very happy to get a PR for this competition because until then, I had not PR'd at this competition, and it was just nice to get a refreshing result like that. So now let's go into the second attempt. Okay, so this is the second scramble. It's also a pretty good edge count, bad edge count. We have 6 bad edges on green front, and then 4 on red front and 4 on white front. So this was another scramble where 2 of the axes had 4 bad edges. So I was pretty thrilled to see this, or I was pretty optimistic, I'd say. So I was like, all right, there's definitely something to take advantage of here, and there was. So I checked a bunch of EOs on green front. I checked maybe 10 or so. And then I checked like 6 EOs on red front, and the first one I found was the one I ended up going with. I checked like 5 on white front, but none of those ended up being very good. So, or I couldn't find anything on them. So what I did for the red front EO was, here, let's find okay. So yeah, so the bad edges are here, here. So already 2 on one on the axis, here and here. So basically you have to move these guys here, and So what I did is I put this edge first here, so with a B, and then with 2 more moves you can put the final edge on the face. I did R2, U2. You could also do L2, U2, which I tried as well, but I found that doing R2, U2 gave better stuff. So, and then final move of EO was L. And already just looking at this is a DR minus. This is a DR minus 44C, which as I went over in the last attempt, is basically the best kind of DR minus when it comes to how many moves you can potentially solve it in. So not only is it a DR minus, it's an insanely good one too. We have already 2 bars here and the headlights here and the edges here. Like this is very, very, very close to DR. So it was a 4-move EO, and the way I solved DR was in another 4 moves, which is pretty lucky. Getting an 8-move DR is extremely good for me, and it's kind of hard to, you don't find those all the time. So what I did is I did an F2 so that we have these sort of kind of diagonal bars, whatever you want to call it. And also the edges are diagonal, so we're looking very good. And you could either pair up the the bars by doing like D2, R2, and then you're basically 1 move away from DR. But you could also do it from the opposite angle. So I did U2, L2, and then I finished DR with an F prime. Actually, I think I did F first, and the DR didn't look that fantastic. But then I just switched it to an F prime, and then this is where things started to get interesting. I noticed that the corner case was basically a JJ, like adjacent corners. This even kind of looks like a J perm. But the best kind of corner case when you have these corners is when you have it like this. And this is actually 1/4 turn away, so slightly worse, or so I thought. And honestly, when I first saw this, I pretty much thought of this alg, or this case, because when you get JJ with flip, you can obviously do it, like that. But there's a lot of 5-slice algs that basically consist of 2 alternating U moves and 2 alternating D moves, and so there's a lot of different conjugates that you can do from different angles. So one of them is actually the pretty much exact same angle that we have here. and it basically goes like slash u prime slash u slash d prime. So what I did is I basically started off by doing that. I basically did the first move of this L, which is kind of a slice, but that already cancels into the last move of dr, which is f. So it I may have been wrong earlier. I think I said I did an f prime, but now this is the f prime. And then I just pretended to do a u prime, but I chose to do a wide u prime because that preserved some blocks and made this square. So this is basically slice u prime, and then I did the slice again. And here we have a better corner case where you have an L of solved corners, and on the other side you have an opposite and not opposite, basically like blue versus orange. So if you do a quarter turn and put the final yellow corner here, you're basically an R2U, R2U prime, R2 away from solving corners, and then another quarter turn to solve HDR, or the corners HDR. But I didn't really find anything crazy off of this exact, or like on normal. So, and since my last move was a double move, I realized I'm just doing that to help myself recognize corners. And if I switch and find an HTR from there, I can remove the double move, and it'll give a shorter HTR. And I just kind of saw what happened, or just, tried to see what would happen. So I switched after doing D prime L2, or essentially just D prime. I had basically this going on, and the corners actually don't look, or upon first glance, they don't look amazing. Actually, they do look pretty good because we have opposites here, opposites here, opposites here, and opposites here, and basically, diagonal stuff everywhere. So what I did is something you can do when you have, good corners and you're on your way to HTR is if you sort of look at the corners and compare them to the centers and see if they're basically solved to HTR. So like this corner is solved in relative to HTR. This corner is solved relative to HTR because you can solve this corner in double moves. You can solve this with U2, R2. This corner is solved relative to HTR, and so is this corner. So all four of these corners you can solve with double moves. And then if you go on this side, all these four corners are not able to be solved in double moves. You have to do a quarter turn to solve all of them. So that's basically what you want. You want to put 2 solved HTR corners on top, 2 on bottom, and 2 on this side, and you basically just do a double move and then a quarter turn. And that basically makes it so you're way closer to HDR. So that's pretty much exactly what I did. I did F2 to get closer to HDR, and then I had the choice of either doing a U or a D, and I messed around with what works for a while. I just was experimenting, and then I just ended up doing D prime instead of U or U prime, because that makes this pair, has this stuff. Yeah, just it looked pretty good. And once again, we have HTR minus 4E4C. We have this kind of this pair here, this pair, which is kind of like half a bar, and then these last 2 corners here, and then these middle edges here. So if I wanted to, like, the shortest HTR, or not the shortest HTR, but, from here, what you could do is you could do, like, put these bars here, so that, do an R2, and then basically, like, you're 3 moves away from HTR. You can do D2, align these bars, and then something like that. But I didn't end up going with that. I tried finding other stuff. So after F2D prime, I switched back. So yeah, after I switched, I didn't do the last L2. I undid the L2 just because, there's no reason to. I just did it for helping myself recognize stuff easier. So basically, after doing D prime F2, switching back to normal, and doing the A move DR plus D prime, we have this. We have HTR minus 4E4C, of course. And I just tried playing around with all the different kinds of mirrors you can do to get HTR. We have this pair here, these 2 corners in headlight sort of formation, and these 2 middle edges right across from each other. After the D prime, I realized if you want to get closer to HTR, you want to make these headlights line up with these pairs. So I just did a D2 that formed this cool block and made it so that you can do a double move to get these corners lined up with their respective pairs. And now we have 2 bars. And these 2 edges are right next to each other, which is really great. So we just have to do a slice move or double slice move. So like F2, B2. And now the bars are connected with their edges, and all I had to do was a quarter turn to finish HTR, which was U. And then I saw this block, I just saw a lot of, good blocks, and here's where it got pretty crazy. I didn't expect it to be such a short finish, but I just kind of started solving blocks. I saw this this square, and then this pair, and it's how it's one move away from being a 2x2x3. And then from here, I'm pretty sure this is called floppy reduction, where you reduce it to basically a floppy cube. I'm not great at explaining it. I'm pretty sure Jay has a really good video on it and a written tutorial, but I knew that this was good. So after B2, I realized that this is basically 3 moves to this 2E2E case, and it's along the same, like the moves are very similar to how you would start doing the salg, so it cancels a lot. So I just played around a lot, and I realized that if you do R2, L2, you have 3 more moves. So, or I'm sorry. Yeah. So you have, what I realized is you can do like D2, R2, and then the last D2 would make it a 6-move finish, but on inverse, we actually did a D prime, so it cancels. I don't know if I canceled it or just found it, without the D2, but either way, it makes it a 15-move HTR with a 5-move finish, so that makes it a 20. And I found this maybe in like 15 minutes or 20 minutes, and I was extremely almost I was very nervous. I was kind of shaking. Everything kind of felt, crazy. And yeah, I was just checking for the rest of the attempt for like 40 minutes. I was just wrote down my attempt. I tried looking for some other stuff, but I realized that if I want to find something better, it would have to be a 19, and that's high hopes. So I was extremely happy with the 20, and I just basically checked for 40 minutes over and over again. I did the solution to make sure it was right. And yeah, I turned it in and I got a 20. And Chris Shanathwani also found a 20 off the same DR and virtually the same solution. He did a little different stuff, but we both got 20s, so that was really cool. And now that's both of our PR singles. And I was just really happy to get such a great single. I didn't really process at the time how good my start was. It was actually basically on world record pace, which I'm not really used to being on for FMC. But yeah, let's get into the third attempt to see how I did that. Okay, so this is the third and last scramble, and in my opinion, this looked like the worst scramble, and I did get my worst solve on it, but maybe there was something crazy that I didn't find. There actually was something crazy that I didn't find, but I would not have found it, and we'll go over that at the end. So for the edge count, the bad edge count, we have 8 on green front, 6 on red front, and 6 on white front. And in my opinion, this is a pretty not great EO count. 6 is kind of annoying to deal with because you just kind of always have to find a reduction to 4 bad. But with 8, you could also find reductions to 4 bad, but you can also be creative and find like a reduction to like FB or something like that, which personally I find very fun and creative. But I didn't find anything like that here. Actually, I did. I found like D, B2, D, FB, which, whatever, gave nothing interesting, in my opinion. But what I ended up doing is I did green front. I actually didn't check any EOs on red front or white front because I don't know, something about nerves, and I was kind of, I don't know, I felt a little, I don't know, risky or like something like that. But I just checked all the EOs on the 8 bad axis because I feel really confident with 8 bad. So we have 4 bad edges on the green side on the axis that you can do a quarter turn to fix them, and then we have the 3 of the other edges on the blue axis. So it almost was a 2-move EO if this last edge was over here. So looking kind of good already. So what you can do with 8 bad is you can reduce the 4 bad with a quarter turn, obviously with F, but you could also do F prime to change it up a little bit, and that'll make your EO slightly different. It might move some pieces around, it might make things better. So it's important to check all those different variations and just seeing what gives the best option. So what I ended up going up with was, instead of doing an F, I did an F prime because I found what we do after gives a good EO. So we now have the rest of the 3 edges here and the last edge here. And there's kind of 2 ways of bringing this edge into one of the spots so that all 4 edges are on the blue side. You could either do B2 so that this, this edge can go here, the 3 edges are here, here, and here, and do D prime to get them all here, and then, you know, do a quarter move to finish it off, and you have EO. That didn't give anything crazy, so I didn't go with that. Another way you can do it is you could do L to bring this edge here, U to bring it all four to the blue side, and then B. Basically finish off EO. And let's see, I looked at the white top side and didn't look very interesting. I rotated, and then I looked at, you know, red top, orange top, whatever, and I realized that, oh, look at that, we have two corners, another two corners on the other side, so four corners, 1, 2, 3, 4 edges, so it's dr minus 4e4c, which is kind of funny because there seems to be a running theme between all three of these attempts and the dr minuses. So what I did is I realized, oh, you can connect this corner with this edge with a B2, which actually cancels with the EO. So instead of a B, I did a B prime. And now we have sort of these two pairs. And this is a pretty nice case. Not the craziest, but it's definitely not even close to the worst. So I was like, all right, sweet. These two edges are here instead of here. So what I wanted to do is start bringing this edge eventually over here and then over here so that I could do a quarter turn and finish DR. So what I ended up, or actually, first I tried looking at normal. I actually ended up switching, but this is interesting because I thought this was going to be what I was going to go with. So what I thought I could do, or what I tried going with, was L prime to bring this corner up here so that if I do a D2, we have one of these bars, and that brings this edge over here as well. So, and then what we can do is basically put this corner here with an L prime, or I'm sorry, an L. And if we were to do double move, it would bring this corner to this pair and make a second bar, and also bring this bar down in addition to making the two middle edges across from each other. So now we're just one move away from the setup, and now we can do a quarter turn for it to be a DR. And I realized this DR is actually pretty good. If you do a U2, it makes the corners better, and it's what, like 3 quarter turns, or 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, I'm sorry, what am I doing? 1, 2, 3, something like that, from being like solved relative to HTR, or maybe more because of how HTR corners work. But all I knew is that this was good corners. It was a 10 move It was a 10 move DR with a pretty good, you know, continuation into HTR. So I thought I could find something pretty good off of it. I played around with it for a while, and I didn't find any good HTRs that looked promising. So what I did is I actually switched after EO, because if your EO is a DR minus on normal, it will be a DR minus on inverse. So I looked again back here, and actually the DR minus looks worse here. But sometimes a longer DR can lead to a better finish. It's just all about the individual DR. So what I did is I looked at this edge, and I did U2 to bring this corner over to this edge to make kind of a pair. And these edges are opposite here, so that's kind of nice. I don't have to worry about moving them. Then I did a B2 to bring this corner up to this pair. And although it kind of moves this edge away back from here, you just have to make sure that you can bring it back over here once you're, you know, finishing up the DR trigger, or the setup to the DR trigger. So now we have sort of this pair, and then this lone corner. I wanted to bring it down here to make this bar, but that would make these edges, you know, in the worst possible position. It would make them across like this, kind of like headlights, and you don't really want that. So I just did like a RL prime, sort of like a slice move, so that when I move this corner, it actually moves this edge back. So now we have these edges across, and now we're just 3 moves away from DR. All we have to do is connect this corner with this pair. We have the bar here, we have a second bar here, and then L prime, and then a quarter turn to finish DR. And I did a D prime. First I did a D, and it didn't look, actually, yeah, these are good corners. It doesn't look like good corners, but this is basically like the R2, F2, R2 case of, what was it, either the first or the second DR I got? I think the first one, something like that. But yeah, so I looked at it and I was like, oh, okay, this is moderately good corners. Like I think this is good. But then I did a D2, you know, just to see what would happen if you, instead of doing a D, you did a D prime as the ending move of the DR. And what I realized is the corners are now much better. we have sort of opposites here and not opposites here. We have sort of two L's. We have opposite here, not opposite, and one corner. And on here we have, on here we have opposites, non-opposite, and one corner. So this can either be really good or really bad. It really depends on how you solve, or like, you know, whether when you try to solve corners, it only takes 2 quarter turns or more. So what I did is I tried to basically like align this corner, this lone corner. So we have like the headlight, the opposite headlights here and the opposite headlights on the other direction. So if you were to do a D2, brings all the corners into this sort of double Y perm state. So on 2x2, that'd be like R2, F2, R2, or maybe just F2, R2, or something like that. But yeah, so I knew that this is definitely very promising. And also, we haven't done any quarter turn moves. So this DR already is HTR minus 1, 2, 3, 4 E and 1, 2, 3, 4 C. So that was really nice. And I didn't really find anything crazy on this. Or I mean, you could do like this, that, and then like that, I guess. But that didn't really lead to anything that promising, because it just kind of felt like, you know, when you try to finish stuff, it's still, you know, 1 quarter turn off from being like floppy reduction or whatever is good. So I switched. So we have headlights, we have these opposite headlights here and this lone corner, or this non-opposite, or not, you know, not matching our headlights or opposite at all. And then we have these opposites here. So they're kind of lined up. So all you really have to do is do a half turn, like an L2, and then bring up this corner with this corner so that everything becomes opposite. So you can either do that with a U2 or a D2. I chose to do D2 because it seemed to be much blockier, because we keep this sort of square, and it made just a lot of stuff happen. This square too. So already we're looking very blocky. So what I did is, you know, the DR minus isn't or the HTR minus isn't very crazy, but if you're from here, you could do a quarter turn, and now it's HTR minus 4 E4C. And here I kind of could tell, like, whoa, this is like very blocky. Like this square made, this pair is made, like almost everything is paired up with something else. So, and we're 3 moves away from HTR. So I had high hopes, or, you know, I was pleasantly surprised by what was going on here. So you have these sort of diagonal bars, or sort of almost bars. What I did was I did B2, so it would line up these bars, and I realized that, whoa, the cube is almost solved. Like, it looks very close to solved. And then I just, you know, inserted the bar and did a quarter turn, and I actually had, this was four centers, and this is an 18 move HTR, which means it was 18 to 4 centers. And the thing about 4 centers is, no matter your skeleton, if it somehow gets to 4 centers, you could actually insert the alg literally anywhere in the skeleton. It doesn't have to be within DR, because if it were something like a normal, you know, like, I don't know, like 3E or something, like once you exit DR and, you know, non-DR moves, like, you know, start doing quarter turns, if you try inserting it, it's going to be, the edges are not going to line up. And usually you have to insert inside of DR/HTR to guarantee something good. It's very rare that outside of DR, the edges line up and you get an insertion that cancels. Sometimes it happens, but it's very unlikely. But with 4 centers, no matter where in the skeleton you go, you will always just have 4 centers, because the cube is solved besides the 4 centers, and centers don't move relative to each other. So with 18 to 4 centers, I was kind of freaking out. I was like, okay, well, the 4 centers alg is 8 moves, like F2, B2, U, D prime, R2, L2, U, D prime, kind of that stuff. And there's, you know, all the sorts of mirrors you can do. So you know, there's a lot of flexibility with this insertions. So I was like, oh my God, what do I do? Can I find an 8 move insertion that cancels 5 moves and give myself a 21? I didn't, you know, it's not possible with this kind of skeleton. But what I ended up doing is going between the B2 and the U2 of my skeleton, which are the third to last and second to last moves of my HTR, or my moves to HTR, aka this skeleton. So B2, U2, you could actually do something like F2, B2 to, you know, start the alg, and that cancels 2 moves. And then I just kept going, And if you do UD prime, the U cancels with the U2 one move. So it was an 8 move insertion and a 3 move cancellation. So basically 18 move skeleton plus 5 more moves. So that makes it 23. And I found this pretty kind of early on. I basically spent almost the entire time like looking for a better insertion or some kind of like fancy way you could do 4 centers to give myself a better result, but I couldn't find it. It was, I tried everything I thought I could try. But yeah, that basically gave me a 23. I inserted it a little differently. Instead of inserting this and doing like doing a U2, I actually did a wide U2. Or I'm sorry, instead of doing a wide U2, I did a U2, and that gave this, which is basically just 4 centers plus a slice move. And you can just insert the same kind of alg, like F2, B2, UD prime, R2, L2. And instead of doing UD prime, you just do it in the other direction. So, it doesn't really matter. Those specifics aren't too important, but that's pretty much how I inserted that and got a 23. The crazy thing is, there's a really, really creative way of finishing this DR that would actually have given me a 20. Have given me a 20 is a crazy phrase. Like it would not have given me, like I would not have gotten it because I didn't know this trick at the time. My friend Chris generated an optimal solution with Cube Explorer, or he found an optimal solution with it, and it just happens to cancel with NIS with the EO. So it's one of those lucky things where your HTR finish cancels with EO, which usually shouldn't happen because HTR finishes are usually just double moves, and the last move of EO is always a quarter turn. So usually that should never happen, but here's actually how it's possible. So what you can do on the DR on inverse is you can do a quarter turn to a bunch of nice bars, and then you can just do a simple HTR finish where you do F2 to bring the bars over here, or not finish, I'm sorry, get this edge over here, and then just one move to setup, and then R prime to finish HTR. And this kind of looks like one of those cases where you can do like R prime L prime U2 RL or something like that. Except, I tried doing, I don't know if I actually found this or checked this, but I think I did, and trying to do any sort of this kind of stuff just gave me, either H perm or double H perm. So I sort of dropped it and didn't really think about it. But something you can do that's really, really interesting is you can do a quarter turn, you can do a B prime, and then do the trigger, and do another B prime, and it'll actually work. And that kind of makes sense if you sort of like look at the details of how the two edges work, or the 2E alg works. And like I understand it more now. But honest to God, I would not have found anything like that, during the attempt because of how much nerves I was feeling. And I flat out, I didn't know that. Like, I didn't know you could do that. There's a lot of cool HDR tricks like that you can do. But stuff like that is usually not very findable by most people, including me. And people who know that trick would maybe have gotten that. But the crazy thing is that the last moves on the inverse of that finish are like D prime, U prime, B prime, and on normal EO, the last move is B prime, or the last 2 moves are U B prime. So the B prime on inverse would cancel 2 moves with the B prime on normal because it would just become B prime B. So they would literally cancel out. And then the U would cancel with the other U, so it would become a U2. And that would make it a 23 minus 3, which would be a 20. Which technically would have given a 20.67 mean, but that's so unbelievably like silly to assume that I would have found that. But it's just a cool hypothetical to look at, and it's definitely a learning experience about what else you can do and how you can be creative with HTR finishes. But yeah, I got a 23, and I was kind of freaking out. I was like, oh my God, I have a sub 22 mean. As long as I write down my solution, I get 21.67. I started calculating it in my head, and I was like, oh my God, like, did I actually like break my PR like by that many moves? Like, it used to be 24 flat, now it's sub 22. So I turned in my solution, and yeah, it was all good. I checked it like crazy just to make sure all the moves were right. And yeah, like I turned it in, and I kind of just like, it took me a while to process. I was like, wait, did I just get that? And I looked up the rankings and realized yeah, that's fifth in the world. There are only like four other people that have subbed that. Um, and that's also second in North America, which is surreal. I that's actually crazy. But yeah, I was very, very excited, very like shocked, honestly, to get something like this. I really didn't know how to react, because it kind of felt a little undeserved. But I have been practicing FMC for a few years now, and I've always found it fun. So I guess just doing that many attempts all the time, uh, kind of paid off. So I was just very grateful to get such an insane result. And yeah, this was actually my first ever FMC victory. I've only ever gotten second or third as my highest placement in FMC. So the fact that I got my first ever win in a finals of FMC, or in any round really, or not that there was a first round, but you know what I mean, was crazy to me. And the fact that I did it with such an insane mean for me is kind of hilarious. But yeah, so all I have to say is thank you to Krish for having this at his house, basically. Like, it was kind of cool waking up and then just doing FMC. Thank you to Krish and Alexi for organizing the whole competition. Thank you to Evan and Zach for delegating it. Literally would not have happened without those four people. Thank you to basically all the friends, all the people that were there, cheering me, all my friends that were cheering me on there. Krish, Alexi, Carrie, Zach, AJ, Donnie, and Chris actually couldn't make it, but he was still cheering me on. So I'm really grateful for all of you for, helping me calm my nerves down after the second solve, and just cheering me on. And everyone was super happy for me when I said what I got, and we were all kind of freaking out. So yeah, that's how I got 21.67 FMC mean of 3 at Westport Warm-Up 2023. And yeah, apart from that, I only have one other thing to say. It's about my upcoming competitions. I'm going to be at Nationals and Worlds this year, or this summer, I guess. Nationals is in basically like a week, and Worlds is in maybe 3 weeks, I think. So all I want to say is that for FMC, I'm like, I'm not trying to, do anything crazy. This is basically like my best performance ever. Even at home, this would be an insane result for me. So I'm just very grateful to get such a, an amazing result. And I really don't think I'm going to do anything similar like that at Nats or Worlds, just because there are much more talented people there that are probably going to do way better with nerves and way better with the scrambles, because, scrambles can always be bad. And bad scrambles is a real test of skill of who can find the best solution. So I really have like literally no expectations for FMC at big comps, because I've basically achieved everything I've wanted to in terms of my PRs. I've gotten a 20 single, and now I have a mean that I would be happy with at home. So or more than happy with at home. So I'm just so happy to have such an amazing result. And I'm going to put all my energy into my main event, which is Square One, and try to place at both of those competitions. We'll see how that goes. But yeah, so with Nationals and Worlds, I'm going to do my best to actually vlog it, vlog those comps. And I know I kind of wasn't true to my word on North American Champs, but I ran into a few hiccups there. I definitely filmed a lot of footage for NAC last year, but I ran into editing troubles. I couldn't edit in time before I moved back to college. I had like some, logistical issues. And honestly, throughout that whole competition, I had a lot of trouble balancing vlogging, casting, trying to place well in Square One, and also sleeping. So in my opinion, I think I overbooked myself. And this year, I'm trying to take it easier, and I'm not casting. So I'm just going to really be focusing on making content and trying to be fast. So, and just spending time with amazing people. So if you're going to Nats or Worlds, I'm excited to see y'all. If you haven't met me or said hi to me, and you want to, I highly encourage you. I like talking to people, and, it's always great meeting new faces. So if you're going to either of those competitions, please feel free to say hi. And yeah, I really, really hope that I will succeed at filming enough footage and editing it in enough time that I'll be able to upload it before I move back to college. So yeah, that's the video. I hope you enjoyed it. It's kind of long, but yeah, I hope you enjoyed. Hope you learned something, and see you later.